Salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best day of the week. It's Sunday. That means it's time for Star Wars Talk. I'm, of course, your host, John Campy. It's an honor and a privilege to have you guys joining me here today as we talk about our favorite thing in the world of movies, Star Wars, all Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. Here's how today's show is going to go, guys. I've picked out 4 email topics that you guys have sent in to me. How do you send in an email topic to be on Star Wars Talk Tuesday? It's simple. Just email me anytime at john@thejohncampiashow.com. That's john@thejohncampiashow.com. And just put the words Star Wars in the subject line. That way I know you're sending in a question for Star Wars Talk. After we get through those questions, we'll go to some live questions that you guys are watching or sending in. And we'll probably call it a day around the 45-minute mark or something like that. All right. With that out of the way, let's jump into the first thing today and say this. Lauren writes, Thrawn is on the mind after finishing the book. I loved it. Thrawn is on the mind after I finished reading the book. I loved it. And I couldn't help but think of the run-in he has with pirates and Wookiee slaves. Seeing that Star Destroyer in the Solo trailer, could Thrawn be on it? It would be amazing for Thrawn to be even mentioned in a movie. I would freak out. All right, thanks a lot for the question, Lauren. And the Thrawn novel was had its ups and downs for me. Like, there are things about the Thrawn novel I quite liked. There are things about the Thrawn novel I thought were quite poor. Like, most of the stuff that focused on Thrawn, I thought worked pretty well. The stuff, however, that was focused on, like, Price, I thought was really kind of a waste. I really could have done without everything that had to do with Price, the eventual Governor Price. And unfortunately, a lot of her stuff took up a lot of the book. And it was during all those parts with Price that I just kind of tuned out. It just wasn't interesting. And not to mention that the character of Thrawn in the book, while I enjoyed it and all of Thrawn's stuff I liked, what I really found was that it was so out of character with the Thrawn that we were getting in Rebels. Like, it was a totally different guy. Yes, he was very intelligent and calculating, but for the most part, he was a different character than the character in the Rebel show. Like, vastly different. So that was there too. The Thrawn novel for me was a bit of a mixed bag. Parts of it I quite liked, parts of it I didn't. Overall, I enjoyed it, but some inconsistencies. As far as Thrawn being in Solo, I doubt it. First of all, it all happens like 10 years before the events of A New Hope, which you could fit in and stuff like that, but there are tens of thousands of Star Destroyers. And it would go back once again to me of the notion of shrinking the galaxy. Like, it just so happens that out of the tens of thousands of Star Destroyers, that one just happens to be Thrawn's at whatever point in his career it is. And I haven't really thought about it. I would have to sit down and try to chart out the timeline from the Thrawn novel to see, okay, so where would he be at that point? 10 years before the events of A New Hope, where would Thrawn have been by then? I'm not really sure where it would, so I'm not even sure he was on a Star Destroyer yet at that point. But for me, again, as much as I love the character Thrawn, I don't want them popping up every other character we see. Again, it's my main criticism of the Star Wars universe right now, is that they seem to keep making decisions that shrink the universe instead of expand the universe. And for me, just so happened that a Star Destroyer that Solo comes across just happens to have Thrawn on it, for me, again, would just feel like it shrinks it up. And it wouldn't do anything for the Thrawn character. I mean, just having him pop up, that doesn't do anything for the character. So, I mean, I know you're excited about it, and I know there'll probably be many people excited about the notion of Thrawn showing up. But I got to tell you, for me, there's not enough payoff. Like, don't get me wrong. If they said that Thrawn was like the main antagonist of Solo, I could be into that a little bit. But just having him pop up for the sake of a name drop, it doesn't do anything for the character, and it just makes the galaxy feel smaller to me. So that's why I personally wouldn't be on board for it. I understand you have some enthusiasm, and I'm sure you're not alone. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would be enthusiastic about it, but for those reasons, it really wouldn't work for me. All right, let's move on to the second email. And the second email today comes to us from Tomer Kamry, who writes, "Love the show and watch every day." Thank you so much, Tomer. What if Boba Fett was sent by Jabba to recruit Han after he gained a reputation in the smuggling world and potentially have to help Han and crew escape the Empire, which is why we see Slave One in the trailer? All right, first of all, we did not see Slave One in the trailer. I mean, anything's possible. No one from Lucasfilm called me to say this, but I have zero doubt. I have very, very little doubt. That is not. Here's what all this thing is going on about. In the trailer, you see right there, kind of just down to the left a little bit, what it is, it's a meteor rock that's kind of shaped. There's no doubt it's kind of shaped like Slave One a little bit. However, when you watch it in the trailer, it's clearly just a meteor. It's clearly just a meteor. It's nothing else. It's not Slave One. And on top of all that, even if Lucasfilm wanted to have a surprise pop-up of Boba Fett and Slave One, if that's what Lucasfilm was doing in Solo, they would not have shown that in the trailer. And to me, when you watch the trailer, you can clearly see the way it moves and everything. It's just a meteor rock. It's not Slave One. It's not Boba Fett. Now watch. We're going to go in and see the movie, and it's totally Slave One, and it's totally Boba Fett. Okay, fine. But for now, I'm going to stick with that's not Boba Fett, and it's not his ship. It's just a rock floating through space. And even if Lucasfilm wanted to put him in the movie, they would not, and they wanted it to be a surprise at all, they would not have shown this. They would not have suddenly just put the ship in there in the trailer. They wouldn't have done it. So no, that's not, I really don't believe at all that that's Boba Fett at all. Let's move on to the other part. Could he be in it because Jabba said, well, remember, Boba Fett's not an errand boy. Boba Fett's not Jabba the Hutt's butler. He's a bounty hunter. And while many times, he's working for Jabba, who's putting out a lot of bounties, he's not an errand boy. He's not, oh, hey, can you go fetch this guy for me? Just go and recruit this guy for me. That's not what Boba Fett does. So I really don't think so at all. Plus, again, this movie happens before he's a smuggler. This all happens about him becoming a smuggler. It's not about afterwards and now he's developed a reputation and blah, 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 blah. So all that kind of stuff you're kind of setting up is maybe something you could suggest for a sequel. Maybe a Solo 2, possibly. But this is all about him just getting into his first crew. So for all those reasons and more, I don't see it. Again, what you're suggesting maybe becomes a possibility for a sequel, possibly. But even then, there's still some roadblocks there a little bit. But again, I don't think that's Boba Fett. I don't think we're going to see Boba Fett showing up because he's not an errand boy. He's not a recruiter for Jabba the Hutt. He's an independent bounty hunter who just happens to do a lot of bounties for Jabba the Hutt. And the timeline doesn't work out. So that's why I don't personally see any of that. But again, stranger things have happened. Let's see what happens. All right, let's move on now to the next topic. And the next topic today comes to us from Alex. And Alex writes, quick question about The Last Jedi. Yoda was his old mischievous, giggly self like he was on Dagoba, but this was just an act before he revealed his true self. Then he became serious and calm and stayed that way. The crazy Yoda was just an act, right? So why was he like that in The Last Jedi? Here's what I'm going to say to that. It wasn't just an act. Look, everybody you know in your life is not always one way. Somebody's always talking like this. When they're happy, they're like this. When they're sad, they're like this. When they're excited, they're like this. And when they're bored, they're like this. Like nobody we know is like that. I think we saw different aspects to Yoda. There are different sides to Yoda. Yoda's not just one thing. Like remember, even in the prequel, when he's in there with the younglings, right? He's laughing with, oh, truly marvelous the mind of a child is. Like it all depends on the context. There are times when Yoda needs to be serious, and then he's dead serious. And then there's time like when he's with the kids. It's like, oh, and younglings, like how wonderful children's minds are. Like, and then when he's with like Luke in The Last Jedi. It's not that nobody has like one personality, and that's it. Everybody has different aspects to themselves, depending on the context and depending on the situation. So no, I don't believe like the Yoda we got on Dagoba. Like, the one part that was an act was him acting ignorant. Like, he doesn't know anything. Oh, I'm just a simpleton. I don't know a thing. That part. But I also think we did see a bit of Yoda's personality in that. And I think we saw that in the prequels as well. And I think then we see that again in The Last Jedi. Once again, depending on who he's talking to, the context he's in. I mean, just like your persona will be a little bit different from when you're talking to your mom or when you're talking to your buddy watching a football game on Sunday night. You're still the same person. There's just different dimensions of you that come out depending on the context you're in. And I think Yoda's the same way. So no, I think there's any inconsistency there at all. And I think if things needed to get serious, Yoda would get serious again. So anyway, that's just kind of the way I say it. It's an interesting question you bring up, but I don't see it as an inconsistency at all. I think it's just different aspects of the personality of Yoda, just like all of us have different aspects to our personalities. Okay, let's move on now to the final emailed in question today. And the final emailed in question today comes to us from Marco Verg, who writes, "You said you didn't like the Star Wars prequels. That's an understatement. I like them as much as the original trilogy since I grew up with both. I do feel a little difference of tone between the trilogies, though. My question is, do you think George Lucas made them for the wrong reasons, money, instead of the creative process?" All right, so this gets to the heart of it. Everybody knows I'm not a fan of the prequels. I don't like the prequels. That's fine. There are people out there who do, and that's great. I celebrate that there are people who like them. And we can all be Star Wars fans together. Here's the funny thing, though. Let me defend George Lucas a little bit here when it comes to the prequels. You know, there is a tone difference. There are massive differences between the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy. The question you pose, did George Lucas make the prequels for the wrong reasons? Did he just make them for money? I'm going to say no, he didn't. And I'll explain why. Number one, George was rolling in money by the time he did the prequels. By the time he did the prequels, he was absolutely rolling in money. Reason number two, he loves his Star Wars universe. Loves it. That's why he couldn't help himself from tinkering with the special edition stuff, right? He loves those movies. And we may or may not like what some of the things he did in the special edition stuff, but he did it because he loves that stuff, you know? And so he went in and he fiddled with them, blah, blah, to really make it even closer to what he always envisioned. Okay, that's fine too. But the thing is, he made the prequels because he loves Star Wars. He loves his creation. And he was only waiting to do them for the technology to catch up so he could make the movies he was envisioning. And there's this famous story of Steven Spielberg showing George Jurassic Park for the first time, and then George going, "Now is the time. We now have technology at a point where I can push the technology even further with ILM, and we can make the movie I've always wanted to make." And at the heart of it, that's why George Lucas made the prequels. Not because he wanted the money, although money's great. Not because of this reason or that reason. It's because he loves Star Wars. He loves his creation. And he had wanted to do more for a long time, but he was just waiting for the time that he could make them the way he wanted to make them. Now, that being said, it becomes a completely different discussion about how good or bad were those movies. Did his vision work out? Did they, was it worth the wait and all that? Those are all separate issues. But the one thing I will never doubt, personally, even though I dislike the prequels greatly, the one thing I will never doubt was where George Lucas's heart was when he decided to make those films. I don't think it was for the wrong reasons. I don't think it was for the money. I don't think it was for corporate greed. I don't think it was for any of that stuff. I think it came out of a place of love. I really do. Now, misplaced love, maybe. Maybe it was a bad manifestation of it, but it came out of a place of love. He loved his universe that he created, and he wanted to tell more stories in it. And he knew the fans wanted more stories too, so he wanted to give the fans stuff. Was it what they really wanted? Maybe, maybe not. But that's the motivation. So I could sit here all day and list off all the things that I don't like about the prequels, but one of the things you will never hear out of me is any sort of doubt about the motivation behind them and the place from whence they came. Lucas made them because he loved it. He wanted to give the audience something they loved. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. That's up for debate. But I'll never doubt the motivation for it and where those things came from. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents on that. What do you guys think about it? Do you think George Lucas had ulterior motives? Do you think he was just being driven by greed in making the movies? What do you think about it? Jump into the comments section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys, with all that out of the way, we're going to take the remaining time of the show here and just take the live questions that you guys who are watching live want to talk some Star Wars, send on in those questions. Let's go over to it right now, and we're going to start off with Chris Martin, who writes, favorite expanded universe character and storyline? Oh, that's easy for me. It's the Thrawn trilogy. Speaking of Thrawn, which we were talking about a little bit earlier in the show, to me, it's the Thrawn trilogy. I love that character. And the way he was portrayed in the in The Last Command, and that what we refer to as the Thrawn trilogy, was spectacular. And I find a lot of consistency in that character and the character we got in Rebels. And that whole storyline was fabulous. So I know it's a little cheap to say it because it's a very popular thing, but really my favorite character from the expanded universe stuff was indeed Grand Admiral Thrawn. I loved Thrawn and I love that storyline. So yeah. All right. Next one comes to us from Luke1234, who writes, are you a Maple Leafs fan more than a Star Wars fan? It's an apples and oranges comparison. My 2 great loves are movies and sports. Those are my 2 great loves. Like I've told you guys a lot before, if I wasn't doing movie punditry, I would be a sports talk host. I mean, that would be my next great love, would be doing sports talk. So in one world of movies, my absolute favorite thing is Star Wars. In another world, my love of sports, my absolute favorite thing in the sports world is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Have been since I was a little child. I bleed blue and white. All the way back to the, I was really young, but like the Daryl Sittler, when you had the great lines of Wilf Paymont, Rick Vive, Bill Derlego, Boria Salming, or Boria Bonehead as we call him sometimes, Ian Turnbull, like back to the days, all the way up to the eras of Wendell Clark, then Matt Sundin came over and all that kind of stuff, all the way up now to the days of Matthews. I have been a long-suffering Toronto Maple Leafs fan. And I don't want to hear about the Chicago Cubs and blah, blah, blah. The Toronto Maple Leafs in my lifetime have never won squat. Once they got to the semifinals in my lifetime. So it's tough to call. But so that's like saying, well, what do I like better? A Ford Charger car or a Red Delicious apple? What are we talking about? So they're 2 different things. I will say this. My 2 great loves, other than obviously my wife, who I keep a picture on my desk now. Now that I got a bigger desk, I have a place I can keep a picture of my wife. My 2 great loves, other than my wife, obviously, movies and sports. I will say that my love for movies supersedes my love of sports by a little bit. So you can interpret that however you want. But in the world of movies, my favorite thing is Star Wars. In the world of sports, my favorite thing is the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I will say that what I will say is that my love of movies is a little bit grander than my love of sports. So there we go. That's what we're going to say to that. All right. Let's move on now to the next one. And the next one says, hey, John, your old buddy Christian Harloff said the opposite of you. He said episode 9 should open with the funeral of Leia and send her off. It's idiotic. It's idiotic. Super smart dude. Super smart dude. Don't get me wrong. I'm a super smart dude. I say idiotic things all the time. Super smart dude. That's an idiotic thing to say. Now, that very well could be how they started. They very well could be how they started. It's moronic. It's stupid. It's a spit in the face to the legacy of Carrie Fisher. It's the idea of just discarding and trashing and tossing aside the Leia character after all the decades that Carrie Fisher put into giving us that character. And now to not bring that character to the character's proper conclusion because we can't have the respect enough for Carrie Fisher to recast the role and get somebody to carry the ball across the finish line for her. Carrie's dead. Fuck Leia then. Fuck her. Just toss the character aside. Screw Leia. Not worth our time. Just start the movie with the funeral scene. Fuck Leia. Start it with the funeral scene. Screw it. We can't be bothered. Disrespectful. Completely disrespectful. This has been my argument all along, and what I will say up until episode 9 comes out. Carrie spent a lifetime giving us that character. Carrie went through a hell of a lot of stuff to get herself ready to come back for The Force Awakens and for The Last Jedi. And for now that she can't carry the ball across the goal line herself, we're not going to let the character of Leia go to Leia's proper conclusion because we can't be bothered? It's bullshit. Total bullshit. And look, there are a lot of people in the world of Star Wars fandom, who think differently than me. And that's fine. They think that maybe they're misguided, but they think the respectful thing to do. See, this, I don't get mad at it because I know it's, again, coming from the heart. Their heart is in a place of wanting to be respectful to Carrie Fisher. So I can respect that. There are many people who I know who are great Star Wars fans in the world of fandom who think, yeah, the thing to do is to write out the Leia character. Just write her off. And I respect that. And their heart's coming from a place of wanting to respect Leia. My position, though, is that is the most disrespectful, spit in the face, ridiculous, moronic thing you can possibly do. And yeah, there it is. I mean, there are people who are a lot stupider than me who think they should write Leia out. There are people out there who are much smarter than me that think they should write Leia out. But I'm never going to change my mind on this. Unless Carrie's daughter comes out and says, I don't want Leia recast. If she were to say that, then that ends the discussion. Then I'm going to go, okay, I still think we should, but if Carrie's daughter doesn't want that done, then I'm fine. Then no problem, no more words out of me. That's cool. And I'm sure if Carrie's daughters came out and said she does want Leia recast, I'm sure everybody else would go then, no problem, cool, let's do it. But barring that, to me, it's just the most idiotic notion. And look, like I said, not that people who believe that are idiots. I'm not, sometimes I'm an idiot, but I'm a smart dude and I say idiotic things. You're a smart person and you say idiotic things. I think this is one of those cases where there are some very smart people out there saying some very stupid shit. But that's just my thought on it. Again, it's all respect. We're all coming from a place of wanting to respect the legacy of Carrie Fisher. And quite frankly, to my own sadness and my own chagrin, I think them starting off episode 9 with the funeral scene of Leia is very likely what's going to happen. Maybe not very likely, but I think there's a strong possibility that is the way episode 9 will start. I'm not going to be happy about it, but just because I'm not happy about it doesn't mean it's not what I think is going to happen. So I think there is a strong possibility. I don't think they'll have the balls. I honestly don't think they're going to have the balls to do the right thing and recast the character. But hey, there you go. Let's see. Chris Warden writes, back on February, I said Solo might do 150 million opening weekend and 900 million worldwide. Now I'm changing it to 165 million and over $1 billion worldwide. I still don't see it. You know, it's funny because the early tracking from Box Office Magazine came out and said Han Solo 150 million opening weekend. I mean, I would love it. I mean, that would be awesome if it did, but I just don't see it. I still see it being about 100 million opening weekend. But I hope, this is one of those situations, you know, we all have these situations where we would love to be wrong. This is one of these situations, Chris, where I hope you're right and I hope I'm wrong. I just have a hard time getting the idea that it can make that much on opening weekend. And I still don't think it's going to be $1 billion film. I still don't think. I will say this, though, and I mentioned this in another show. If Solo crosses the $1 billion mark, that ends the discussion. That just ends the discussion about what is more relevant, the MCU or Star Wars. That ends the discussion. Because if Solo, a movie that nobody asked for, with all the drama that went on behind it, if Solo makes $1 billion, that'll make 1, 2, 3, 4 films in a row for Lucasfilm and Star Wars to cross the $1 billion mark. Something the MCU has never done and never will do. They're about to have 2 films in a row cross the $1 billion mark. They got Black Panther, and then they're going to have Avengers Infinity War. Ant-Man and the Wasp isn't going to cross $1 billion. It would be great if it did, but let's be honest, it's not going to. I highly doubt Captain Marvel is going to cross $1 billion. It'll be very successful, but probably like Thor Ragnarok successful. Man, if Solo crossed $1 billion, 4 films in a row on a film that nobody asked for, it would be remarkable. Again, I don't see it happening, but man, if it did, that would be something else. Okay, let's go on here. Dylan Trost writes, in Solo, do you think they will show us how Han got his scar similar to how The Last Crusade showed us how Indy got his scar? I don't know. I mean, there's still like a lot of years between the events of Solo and the events of A New Hope. So I don't think they have to cross every bridge in Solo. I don't think they have to dot every I and cross every T and make sure they cover every single base in Solo. There's so much time between the events of A New Hope and Solo that, anything could have happened in there that you don't need to do that here. I don't think he has to do every modification to the Millennium Falcon in this movie. I don't think he has to find his iconic vest in this movie. I don't think that everything we know about Han Solo doesn't have to be introduced in this movie because, again, there is such a big period of time between the events of Star Wars Solo and Star Wars A New Hope. Huge gap. So I'm going to guess no, but I mean, you're onto something there, Dylan. It is totally possible. They could, and it would be an interesting wink to the audience. I don't know that they'll feel the need to do that, but you never know. Keep your eyes open. But I'm going to tell you, if they do, I'm instantly going to think of this moment on the show, Dylan. If they do that in the movie, I will instantly remember this moment on the show. All right, just time for a couple more here. Next one comes to us from John Hine, who writes, wait a second, I got to back up. There we go. John Hine writes, over under 25%, Cassian Andor cameo in Solo. Under. Remember, the events of Rogue One happen like days before the events of Star Wars A New Hope. This Solo movie happens 10 years before the events of A New Hope. And again, it would be the same thing. So why have a little teenage Cassian or, a early 20s Cassian? What's the point? I mean, again, it would just shrink the universe. So I don't think so. But here's the interesting thing. This is where I'll say this could get interesting, John, is that I would be more amenable to say that than once again shoehorning Boba Fett in. Because we've seen them shoehorn Boba Fett in before. I would be more amenable to this. I'll still take the under on 25%, but it's not a horrible idea. Dylan Trost writes, who's more likely to be in Solo, Boba or Jabba? I don't want either. I really do not want either. I like both the characters very much. But again, the whole universe shrinking thing, shoehorning, forcing these characters in there. I think if anything, I'll go more likely, maybe Boba Fett, because Boba Fett can pop up anywhere. Jabba is, mobility challenged. Let's just say that. He can't get around as easy and he can't pop up in as many places. Like, you're not going to be in a cantina on some planet and Jabba comes walking in. That's not going to happen. So you have more flexibility with a Boba Fett cameo popping up. So I'll say the more likely out of the two, Boba Fett, but I don't want either, to be honest. Let's see here. Gareth Tucson writes, in episode 3, Palpatine looks at Obi-Wan. He says to Anakin his fate will be the same as ours. All 3 died on a version of the Death Star. I believe you got that wrong. I believe Anakin says to Palpatine his fate will be the same as ours. Because remember, in that scene, Palpatine was saying, we got to leave him. And then Anakin says his fate will be the same as ours. So that's what he says. All 3 died on a version of a Death Star. And actually, that's a good point. I don't know if I've considered... Oh, did somebody mention that once? I don't know. I don't think I've considered that before. That, they say it would be the same as ours, and ultimately it was. All 3 of them died on a Death Star. Different ones, nonetheless, but they all kind of shared the same fate. Although one was struck down in a lightsaber battle, one was thrown over, thrown down into a shaft, and one died of lightning wounds. So they all died in very different ways, but they all happened to die on a Death Star. Even though technically speaking, none of them died as a result of a Death Star being destroyed, right? They were all dead before their respective Death Stars blew up, right? Obi-Wan died in the lightsaber fight. The Emperor got thrown over the thing, died in a before the Death Star ever blew up. And Vader, in the arms of his son, he died before Luke got off the ship and the Death Star blew up. So they all died on Death Stars, but all in very different ways. But I could see a little bit of a connection there. Why not? Corboko writes, does Fox still own the distribution rights to the original trilogy? If I'm not mistaken, I think for at least... if I'm not mistaken, I think they still have some kind of rights on the original film. And again, don't take me at face value on this, because I haven't thought about this in a long time. I think Fox still has some kind of rights over the first film, but not the other two. Again, I'm unclear about that. I haven't looked into that in a long time. Totally fair question. Guys in the chat board, look up some Google answers and start talking amongst yourselves about that. Let's see here. Koba writes, I feel I am the only one who doesn't want an Obi-Wan movie. What story can they tell? The prequels were his backstory. Well, here's the thing, Koba. I was also against an Obi-Wan movie. I'm sick and tired of watching younger version of this character movie, now a younger version of that character movie. Let's just do new movies. How about new movies and new planets and just expand the universe instead of shrinking it? However, enough people talked me into getting into the idea of an Obi-Wan movie. And here's why. Because of the exact question you're asking. Because enough people were able to convince me that there is enough you could do with Obi-Wan. Like, he ends up on that planet of Tatooine, but then there's decades. What other adventures, what other things did he have to do on that planet to keep the Skywalkers safe? Or did he have to actually leave the planet for a period of time? Nowhere in the original trilogy does Ben say, I've been living in this hut unchanged, no vacations for 30 years. He never said that. For all we know, he left for a year. Like everything looked good on Tatooine, somebody desperately needed his help somewhere, he went off to take care of it. Now there's some people saying you could do a Darth Maul thing. Again, to me, that's shrinking the universe. Let's expand it a bit. But there's a lot of different options you have with an Obi-Wan with an adventure on Tatooine. Because remember, it's a wretched hive of scum and villainy. I mean, there's a lot of different like crime lord stories you could get into with Obi-Wan there, trying to maybe be like an equalizer. Like a Denzel Washington equalizer. He's the Robert McCall of Tatooine, like helping people who need help. There's lots of stories there. Maybe he goes off planet for a bit. So it's funny, you're mentioning about what story can they tell. The thing that actually gets me a little bit interested is there's an unlimited number of stories you could tell. And that's how people talked me into being open to an Obi-Wan movie. Now, don't get me wrong. If you give me the option of an Obi-Wan movie or a brand new movie that expands the universe, I'll take the brand new movie. But if you're going to do an Obi-Wan movie, I am more open to that now than I was before because enough people talked me into being open to it. So there you go. But hey, man, I totally get where you're coming from, Koba, because I was there myself. I totally get where you're coming from. John Hine writes, and we had another little jump. Hold on a second. John Hine writes, rumor that Kathleen Kennedy wants to play Leia. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. Now watch, she plays it, but she's not an actress. I don't believe that. Sindre Telso Kaldal writes, Luke flashback using de-aging in episode 9. Yeah, that's totally possible. I mean, here's the thing. People get too excited about the de-aging technology. It's like, oh, we saw this movie where there was a 2-minute scene with Robert Downey Jr. in Age of Ultron look younger. Do a whole movie like that. Those are two very different things, man. But some kind of flashback? Yeah, a short scene? Yeah, you could do that. I'd be curious to know what the purpose of such a scene would be, but it is totally possible. You guys know me. I still think there's a 5% chance that Luke's alive in episode 9, but that's another topic for another time. Let's see here. Just a couple of minutes left here. Brimmick70 writes, just for fun, How would a retconned Mara Jade work in the new canon / episode 9? Also, wouldn't Jessica Chastain be the best choice for MJ, or Star Wars' version of MJ, Mara Jade? Why? Because she's a redhead? I mean, look, Jessica Chastain's a great actress, so sure, she'd be great in the role. There's 100 other great actresses who would also be great in the role. Moving on from that, how could they do it? I don't know. Somebody else wrote into me just a little bit earlier, just saying that, hey, what if, they added a Mara Jade, and she was there at the temple with Luke, and she died at that temple when Kylo and the Knights of Ren destroyed it. That would add more emotional oomph to, Luke's character. You could. To me, again, I'm going to use that word shoehorning. It would feel like we're shoehorning her in. At this point, as much as I like the Mara Jade character in the expanded universe, I just don't know that there's a place for her in the current movie setting. I just don't know that there's a place for her. I feel like they have conducted the story with Luke in particular in such a way that there's not really a way to put the Mara Jade character in it somewhere. Whether it would be a good idea or a bad idea is a separate thing, but I just don't know that there's a place for her. So I'm going to guess no, and I'm going to guess there's really not a way to do it. Unless you wanted to have like a brand new character in episode 9 that is disconnected from Luke, and her name is Mara Jade, and she's very similar except with a different backstory. You could do that. You could do that easy enough. But as far as the classic Mara Jade that we're all familiar with, I just don't know that there's a place for her anymore. I just don't know you can make it work. But hey, that's why there are writers who are better at this than me. All right, let's move on here. Crampster writes, hey, John, do you think JJ here? Okay, apparently we're back up and running again. Sorry about that. Had a little bit of a hiccup with YouTube receiving the stream. Anyway, we seem to be back up and running. Okay, so getting back to the question at hand. Do I think that JJ had a bigger challenge with episode 7, or will he have a bigger challenge with episode 9? I really don't think the fan divide is that big of an issue at this point, not after one single film. But you're talking about trying to finish off a trilogy. You're talking now about trying to finish off and finishing strong. And in a lot of trilogies throughout history of film, getting the third one right has been a difficult challenge. Nailing part 3 has been a difficult challenge. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say he's facing the tougher challenge with 3, because now you got to bring it home. Setting things up presents its own unique challenges, yes. But the setup is easier than bringing it home and knocking it out of the park. I actually believe this entire new Star Wars trilogy, episodes 7, 8, and 9, are really going to be looked back upon and be judged based on how episode 9 finishes it off. It started off incredibly strong with The Force Awakens. I quite like The Last Jedi, but I had some significant issues with The Last Jedi as well. Even though overall I quite like it, but it's got issues, and I'm not afraid to talk about those issues. And I know there's a number of people who didn't like it. So now I think an awful lot is riding on episode 9. So now I believe the entire way history is going to look back on this trilogy is really going to be influenced by how well or how poorly J.J. Abrams brings it home. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I believe the bigger challenge, the tougher mountain to climb right now, and definitely the more pressure, is going to be on episode 9. Because not just one film, I believe an entire trilogy and how it's going to be perceived moving forward is going to be based on how well he does episode 9. So that's just my thoughts on that. Okay, next up, Rob Turner writes, where'd it go? Rob Turner writes, Sith is an anagram of shit. Coincidence? Yes, I do think that's a coincidence, but it's very observant nonetheless. Thomas Bergstrom writes, Clancy Brown as Sith Lord in an old Republic TV series. Again, you know me, I hate the questions of, what do you think about this actor playing this role? Sure, I don't care. I don't care. As long as the actor you're mentioning is a good actor, then yes, that actor can play any role they want. So Clancy Brown, classic. I love Clancy Brown. He was in The Highlander, for heaven's sakes. Clancy Brown as Sith Lord, sure, he's a good actor, why not? But I'm going to say that about any good actor, so I don't really care. On to Vegas writes, if Deadpool 2 interview scene as an homage to Mystery Men, was Mystery Men a hat tip to Blazing Saddles? Sorry, man, this is Star Wars talk, dude. I apologize, but this is Star Wars talk. We're only talking Star Wars here today. Let's see. Third Man 3 writes, what do you make of these channels that solely make videos to bash Star Wars and fire Kathy Kennedy? Geeks and Gamers is the worst, as everything is anti-women, social justice warrior, and believe everything is agenda-driven. I'm not familiar with the channel you're talking about. Look, here's the thing about the movies. The thing about movies is, and I've always said this. Here, let me give you this example. Somebody asked the other day, as my camera pops off for a second, just give me a moment. Somebody asked me the other day, what do I think about the trend at like the Cannes Film Festival, where the Cannes Film Festival is known for sometimes audiences will actually boo a movie. Do I think that's right? And here's the thing. I've always felt that, look, if you are a movie fan and you pay your money to go to a movie, you have bought the right to cheer or to boo. If you're a film fan and you have invested yourself in movies and you spend your time and energy and your money investing yourself in movies and watching movies, you have the right to cheer or to boo. That is the right of the film fan. And it's how the film fan engages the community. Guess what? If there's something I don't like, I'm going to talk about the fact that I don't like it. Like, for instance, earlier today, I put out a video about James Cameron's comments about comic book movies. And while I love James Cameron, and I made that very clear, I love James Cameron. I mean, he gave me my all-time favorite action film, True Lies. He gave us Aliens, and he gave us Terminator, and he gave us, the two biggest box office films of all time. I love him, but I hated his comments. So as a film fan who's invested in him and his movies, I have the right to cheer something he says. I have the right to get on here and boo something he says. And we should be supportive of that. And if there are channels or whatever that they feel that the best use of their time is to boo as opposed to cheer, then they have the right to do that. Now, as far as channels that are just like simply dedicated to hating on Star Wars or whatever, I'm not familiar with whatever channels you're talking about. I will say this. I prefer my fandom to be based on the things we love rather than to be defined by the things we hate. I never want to be a fan who is defined by what I hate. I don't like the prequels, but I'd rather define myself as a Star Wars fan. Even though there's something about Star Wars I don't like, I would rather be defined as a Star Wars fan, even though I don't like the prequels. I would hate my channel ever to be just about 24/7 how much I hate the prequels. When the prequels come up, I will mention I'm not a fan, I don't like them, and here's my reasons why. Here's some of the things I like about the prequels. Lightsaber fight, pod race is awesome, John Williams' score is great. Like, yeah, but I never want my channel to become defined by what I hate. I want my channel to be defined by what I love. So again, I'm kind of shooting in the dark here because I don't know which channels you're talking about, but I think everybody has the right as a film fan to cheer or to boo. I think just like I have the right to criticize the prequels, other people on other channels have the right to criticize The Last Jedi or whatever else they want to talk about. Now, I've got my problems with the ass backwards fucknut clowns who are just racists, homophobes, and misogynists. Yeah, but that has nothing to do about being a film fan. That just comes from being, bending your cousin over a barrel and fucking your cousin. That has nothing to do with being a film fan. That's something completely different. But yeah, if there are people who don't like Star Wars Last Jedi, they have every right to get on and talk about, to either cheer or boo. And I got no problem with that. I have no problem with it. Because if we have a problem with them hating on The Last Jedi, then you shouldn't have the right to ever say anything negative about any other movie, and nor should I. And that's not what fandom is. So I'm cool with it. I'm cool with it. Again, I don't want to be one of those people that becomes known by what I hate. I want to be known for the things I love, even while criticizing some other things. And I hope other channels strive to be, more defined by the things they love rather being defined by what you hate. But again, I got no problem with it. And if there are channels that want to express their fandom that way, then hey, more power to them. Let them do whatever they want. Let's see. Jack Spittle writes, what the fuck is a German muffin? I love Ron Swanson. Dear Canada, F you. And the last question I will take today. Oh, you know what? No. I'll just take these last two here. NPE94 writes, love superhero films, but I dislike the way even intelligence fans will go after anyone that criticizes genre. It feels like a religion to some people. I appreciate the comment, but I'm here to talk about Star Wars, not comic book films. And the last question of the day is, Trojan of Narnia writes, is Star Wars the one about the wizard boy? I remember that. That's great. All right, guys, that will do it for this week's installment of Star Wars Talk. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Don't forget, we'll be back again every single day. While you're here, peruse around my channel. Look up all the other videos we have. Of course, every morning we've got open mic, and then Monday through Friday in the afternoons, we have our movie news show, The John Campea Show. Make sure you join us for that. Click on that subscribe button, become a subscriber. My name's John Campea, guys. Thanks so much for joining me, and until next time, bye-bye.